face!
So Twitter is having a field day with the show on Netflix called Adolescence. There's also the topic of race swapping, where it says, Jordan Peterson, Reddit. Why is this in Jordan? Anyway, this is how Netflix portrays a 13-year-old knife murder in the UK. The news headline is who it was based on. Teenager jailed for life for Elion Andem's murder. Damn, he looks demon-possessed, the hell? Anyway, like, at first when I saw that people of every ethnicity, they were mentioning, like, the race swapping in regards to the show, I was very confused, to be honest, because to me, it's a show that's kind of like a documentary, but based on a fictional character that at the most can be inspired by real events. So what exactly were they race swapping? Now, to be candid with you, I haven't exactly watched the show yet, and I'm not here to particularly review the show itself. I will watch the show, but like I've watched clips of it, like when the psychiatrist or psychologist, whatever she is questioning, I guess, Jamie, the perpetrator of the stabbings. And on Netflix, it claims that in response to the question of whether or not this whole thing is based on a true story, it said that while Jamie's story specifically isn't based on a real person or event, the idea of the series did spring from reports that co-creator Graham had heard about on the news of young boys being involved in knife crimes. Other articles are also mentioning that, you know, what happened in the third episode, and it uncovers Jamie's motives for killing Katie. And apparently it's revealed that the girl was calling him an incel, and that he believes, I guess, that 80% of women are attracted to 20% of men, and how she basically bullied him after he asked her out on a date. And so it's basically this female child or person bullying him and treating him like shit, and then I guess he retaliated by just taking her life. Then the article continues by going on about how teenage boys are watching a lot more dangerous stuff, like Andrew Tate, and we'll get into that because yes, that is an issue, but it just didn't crop up for no reason. I guess that's even the reason for this guy making this in the first place, because he's trying to spread awareness to it and whatnot. It even says here that developing the series Storm is directed to the manosphere or red pill and incel culture, and quickly grasped the attraction of the toxic community. And he said, I knew almost immediately that if I was an isolated kid, I would find answers as to why I felt a bit lost. So the red pill community has become less about a man's mental health and more about men, and yes, some women, preying on the despondence of lonely men. I mean, like, a lot of women do that, so I'm not even gonna lie. But these men in these red pill communities that are cropping up, especially in the recent years, they are preying on lonely men. You have men who don't know how to be men, trying to teach each other how to be men while taking advantage of them by offering them courses and shit that's not helping them, and only sometimes serves to make things worse and make them even more frustrated. And it's less of a case of men taking care of other men and more so not so fresh mentality that only the fittest survive. A lot of these dudes want to feel important and flex on other dudes by making themselves gods and saying, hey, look, follow me because I have all the secrets to happiness, knowing that most men will never achieve it.
Be like physically abusive.
You gotta endure. People are too...
You want to stick into relationships?
People are just...
look,
people nowadays are just... situation.
This guy goes by the name of MLD and is considered a thought leader in the red pill manosphere. And not only does this clown say shit like this, he also talks about wanting to hit women. The red pill movement is imploding because its thought leaders are endorsing men like this. It's becoming obvious that the goal of the red pill thought leaders isn't to have healthy relationships in their own lives and in turn to teach other men how to have them as well, but instead their main goal is to denigrate women because of their unresolved rage.
But I honestly think it's a compounded issue because the whole reason that this started in the first place is because men feel underappreciated. And it's like being a man now or experiencing regular masculinity is somehow labeled as toxic, and now a man has to act like a second-class citizen to be seen as a non-threat. And it's kind of the same issue I've seen growing up in the Christian religion. Now, I'm not saying everybody's like this, but I'm just saying, even from my personal experience, the more that a religion or a belief or a community tells you that there's something wrong with you as you are, the more repressed you feel and frustrated and angry or depressed and sad. In the Christian religion, like an example was Matthew 5:27 and 28, they'll tell you or follow the teaching that it is wrong for you to self-pleasure because it's basically akin to homosexuality because you're doing the act with yourself. And then, let's say you're thinking about somebody else, like it suggests in this part, that's just as bad as if you did it. Yep. So if God happens to come back while you're flicking off, you will still go to hell or get left behind or what have you, because you're having thoughts of a guy or someone that you like while you're doing it, but not actively with the person, which is so freaking ridiculous. And every single day I had to live while I was growing up thinking there was something wrong with me and that I was like a sexual deviant or something. And I felt really guilty afterwards for doing something that was so basic, you know, for having feelings that were just a regular part of being human. So what happens is a lot of these people in these religions or ideologies or cults or situations end up becoming addicted to either substances or they have more hedonistic tendencies because they're so freaking repressed to all hell and being told something is wrong with them as they are. It's the same reason that if you take a wild animal off the street or out of the wild, like a lion or a tiger, and try to put it in an apartment and make it like live in a way that it's not designed to live, like we see with this lion and this clip over here, it's going to eventually remove someone's throat from their body. Just saying. And the thing is, like, the people will see this, that have these animals as pets, and, well, they're a wild animal, and they understand these animals have general behavior that they're not able to take part in, which is not very harmful at all. But then when the animal, having been so repressed and treated as though they're not supposed to be the animal they were born as, finally snaps, people want to put it down and then claim all of its species is dangerous. Let dogs be dogs, let cats be cats, let horses be horses, let women be women, and let men be men, you know? And let children be children. I think that's one of the main points of how we got here. The same thing happened to women when they didn't have as many rights. Men can do whatever they wanted, but the women had to be perfect little dolls that were not allowed to have feelings that would come very naturally to a woman, you know, like having those feelings. And I can imagine what it must have been like back then if you had feelings and you're not allowed to think about them or act on them, but all the dudes in your community get a pass if they do the same thing and so they're wild oats and whatnot. If you cheat, that's not allowed. Of course, you're ostracized. If they cheat, now you're just being a dude. And people may look down on him and say, hey, dude, that's not cool, especially if they're good men, but it's nowhere near the same level as it would be or how they look down on women. And so what happens now when women finally get that freedom, a lot of them go fucking ape shit and racking in hundreds and thousands of freaking bodies and going absolutely insane because they've been repressed.
Big 1000 was completely done. The room was absolutely full. Then we did groups of 5, like one after the other. I wanted to give people more time, so then it went down to like one-on-ones.
I did go in raw.
Number 1 out of 1,057 went in raw. Like, I bent over. At this point, I had like 6 other guys like in front of me. Like, my hands are busy, my mouth's busy. And then I just turn around. I'm like, wait, you're not wrapped up. But yeah, I think like when you're in the moment from like the guy's perspective.
Like, why does it matter, though, if they're in your freaking mouth and they're not wrapped? You do realize it can... Never mind, whatever. Not the point, not the subject. Anyway, then, like, the thing is, it's like a ripple effect, right? Because over time, as women have become more expressive, men, on the other hand, who were seen as the oppressive group from the past, or their founding fathers, whatever, are now expected, or now not expected, to be treated equally, but they have to worship at the feet of women.
What exactly is the nuance in child labor?
Senator, if I may answer that.
Sorry, this question is for Ms. Mahi. Unless, of course, you are trying to speak for a woman.
No, ma'am. I have not, nor will I ever speak for a woman.
That was Mythic Quest, by the way. That part just freaking drove me insane. Like, stick up for me, but no, don't talk for me or stick up for me. Look, I'm just saying, from what I've observed, if a woman does something or says something a certain way about a man, that gets a pass. But if a man were to do the exact same thing, he would be labeled as extremely toxic, misogynistic, and just horrible. He would lose his job, all of that, more so than a woman would. And like the latest case of this is with like 2 students that were fighting in a classroom, and the news blurred it, but you can see it on Twitter. We only see the clip after it started, but this much smaller woman, girl, whatever, is attacking this gigantic freaking dude. And previously, based on other witnesses, she had thrown a metal bottle at him. Then we do see her throw a laptop at him, almost decapitating him with the thing. And she keeps coming at him, even though he's like pushing her away. So he's finally like, okay, fuck it.
Oh no, baby! Bro, tell the guy, tell the
He slams her head on the table after she flings a freaking laptop at his face to try and get her to stop. And while I agree, both of them were probably at fault, She was the one who was the aggressor in the situation, or at least what we could see in the video. But yet people were calling for her to be innocent. My guy, Rowan Leon, actually covered the whole thing in his hilarious way of doing his takes. So go and check out his video. But here's a clip that he showcased that I didn't even see afterwards.
Place, and I want you to pay strong attention to who responds and how they respond.
It just escalated. The substitute teacher did not bother. There was so your daughter told you there was a teacher present.
I was trying to help her out because I was worried about her, and I was seeing if she was okay, so I took her to the office.
Colton police confirmed they responded to the school and cited both students, saying the video does not show what witnesses told them happened moments earlier, when the girl supposedly hit the young man who was, quote, struck in the head multiple times by a metal object. We tried asking Rosemary. The young girl supposedly hit this guy with a metal object several times over there before we see what we see on the video.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
Did that happen?
No, hold up. Let me speak to that.
Stepping in, activists denouncing the incident outside the school.
This is what I'm going to get into later about grown men allowing certain violence against other men. Because listen to what this person says. And this is so freaking ridiculous, not only on the male part of the species, but also seeing stuff like this happen. And because it's a woman or it's a previously oppressed group, like women, accountability is just completely taken away from that person. Let's hear what he says. And you already know, once the person who was there, everybody else is like, yes, this girl hit him first over the head with a metal object several times when he didn't do that to her. And here he comes in, and this is what he has to say, which is crazy.
The video speaks for itself. So I don't care who started it or how it started. We saw the video. That young black child was innocent.
Several times over there before we see what we see on the video.
Yes. Yes.
Innocent? This is the kind of thing I'm talking about, where a girl can assault a dude and get away with it, or is expected to get away with it, or is seen as all of a sudden the precious little glass-cased innocent because the man fought back to defend himself. I'm not saying it's necessarily moral in the way that he did it, but you try getting attacked to that degree by someone who won't stop and see how well you keep your composure when they won't allow you to walk away and they're flinging metal objects at your head. I probably would have kicked it up a notch too, because that cabrona was not getting the hint. Now, I wouldn't be able to do as much damage to her as a dude would, but still, parents and men specifically need to teach their daughters how to be treated, and the women are responsible also for teaching their daughters how to treat other people, and vice versa, actually, because you never know when you're gonna mess with the wrong person who happens to be really crazy. But anyways, it's a much larger discussion, but yes, I do admit that the internet trying so hard to bend over backwards to correct past offenses against women has become a situation where the previously oppressed group is now oppressing the other group, or is expected to be treated as superior. And so the red pill community, or the manosphere, emerged as a reaction to what many of its members saw as the overreach of these very ultra-radical feminists. And yes, while feminism initially fought for equal rights, specifically first wave feminism, some men felt that the modern version of the movement started to glorify certain toxic parts of feminism, and it went ham on vilifying masculinity outright and painting all men as oppressors. And the manosphere positioned itself as a space for men to voice frustrations about perceived gender double standards, declining male roles, and the emotional toll of modern relationships, whether it be between couples or strangers of the opposite sex. So just like how feminism eventually got a radical side where some women started straight up hating men and acting like all masculinity was evil, the red pill or men's movement started off as a space for guys to talk about their struggles and pressures without being judged, the way that women have been able to for a very long time, with no condemnation or no punishment whatsoever, because freedom of expression, right?
Problem is that I hate men, you know?
Lots of women think it's like a female empowerment, I'm a strong woman thing to say that you hate men. On the contrary, when a woman says she hates men, it's usually a telltale sign that she has terrible, horrific experiences with men, and that she allows toxic men into her life, into her love life, into her bedroom. The question isn't, are men toxic? Because there will always be toxic men and women in the world. The question is, why are all the toxic men in your life? Why have you allowed men to treat you so badly that you now hate them?
Exactly. I am very proud of women now speaking up about this, but it initially was supposed to be a place for dudes to vent and feel heard, but that too also got twisted, and now it's filled with dudes who hate women just as hard. So now you've got these two extreme sides, right? You got the radical feminists on one side and hardcore red pill guys on the other side who can't stand each other, blame each other for everything, but then secretly still want to like fuck each other. Like, it's really weird. Actually, it's not actually that weird because we know what it is. I just find the whole thing fascinating. And like I said, it's a much larger discussion than this, but I always find it so freaking entertaining when people create these monsters and then are confused as to why those monsters that they created are acting monstrous of that specific group. And the thing is, both are to blame and not to blame. But anyway, so that's what this article about the Adolescence show was talking about. That's what it was referring to. But most of the conversation around the Netflix Adolescence show is about the race swapping, and they're claiming that this kid was race swapped because the main person responsible for a crime similar to this is a black person. And so everyone is going in on this. So there's this fact check saying that Adolescence was not based on Southport, England and the murders of the girls, because the series Adolescence was announced in March 2024 and began filming in early July 2024. But the incident happened, that everyone thinks it's referring to, happened in late July 2024, and the perpetrator was not a migrant. So knowing all of this around the whole thing with Adolescence and people talking about the race swap, and let's say it's true, why is it that people are saying Netflix Adolescence is disingenuous? Like, why is it a problem to have a little white boy playing it? Now, I'm not saying either is wrong or right. I'm someone who believes that it is quite annoying and insulting when they constantly race swap characters who've already had an on-screen presence and establishment, or, they were real and didn't look like that in history. But as for the fictional character situation, I'm not saying that either is wrong or right. Nobody likes it, and people get tired of it, including the group of the character who has been race swapped or reworked to look like the group that they belong to. And when we're talking about the UK, and I'm wondering what people are talking, because I'm wondering where they're getting this from. So I looked into it, and based on the statistics, apparently knife murders in London are predominantly done by black or non-white Londoners. I actually looked this up on london.gov.uk site, where it says this. Start off here, the full context of the amended motion is, I'm going to read this. This assembly is concerned that despite making up 13% of London's total population, black Londoners account for 45% of London's knife murder victims, 61% of knife murder perpetrators, and 53% of knife crime perpetrators. This means that black Londoners are disproportionately more likely to be victims and perpetrators of knife crime. They add on, this assembly recognizes that knife crime is a long-term issue nationally and that all agencies need to work together to tackle it. Data published in City Hall in December 2021 reviewed disproportionately in serious violence among young people in London. The analysis highlighted that the driving factors behind young people becoming involved in or a victim of violence are lack of opportunity, deprivation, and inequality. I think it's a little bit more than that, but whatever. This assembly believes that it is therefore important to talk about and tackle structural inequalities and institutional racial discrimination across the country to tackle disproportionality in youth violence. Weird. Anyway, imagine having victims of a crime, whether you're black or white, and you could be a good black family living in London, and your family worked very hard and they made their opportunities. And then people who look like you come stabbing you up, and these people, the powers that be, are telling you and everyone else, oh, it's just because these people didn't have, they were deprived of stuff. So almost like they're excusing the criminals for what they're doing, regardless of what they look like. You can imagine how horrible it must be for the victims of these crimes. But anyway, then on the www.gov.uk site, it claims that, starting from here, in relation to knife crime, a 2018 report entitled Justice Matters, Disproportionality references data collected by the Metropolitan Police Service, as we were talking about in the other article I just came from. And this work showed that London in 2015, 50% of knife crime offenders were BAME, which stands for Black, Asian, and Minority Ethnic. Most of the victims from these crimes shared a similar profile with the offenders, so they were in the same ethnic group, and most of them were male. Most of the perpetrators are male, and most of the victims are male. Later in 2017, it claims that 53% of possession of knife suspects were black, and 37% of all suspects were black men under the age of 25. This resonates with the arrest data on Stop and Search, which showed that 56% of all people arrested for offensive weapons following a stop and search were black. Interesting. They should ban knives, right? But like only the semi-automatic ones. But I think in that context, it's probably understandable why people are like, okay, really? Because in America, if you're going to portray a movie about like mass shooting or something like that, it makes sense, I guess, for it to be mostly preferred, like be portrayed by a white dude, because most of the people who do that kind of crime fit that ethnicity. And it says in Statista.com, and 81% of mass school pew-pewers, I'm gonna call it that because I don't want to lag the video or anything like that, but particularly the pew-pewers at school identified as white, and 13% of them were Native American and 6 were Latino. But apparently the ones that happened at college and universities, they were more likely Asian at 44%, which is freaking crazy, followed by 33% were white, and the black and Middle Easterners made up 11%. So yes, there is a demographic. It makes sense if you're making a show or a movie based on something, especially if it's fictional, that you have someone that fits that demographic, because that's the norm, or not really the norm, you know what I mean? But then you see a significant amount, or see that a significant amount of people who like to dead people via the penetration angle, if you know what I mean. The stabby stabbers are done by black people in a specific group or geographical location, then it makes sense to portray that using that ethnic background. But Netflix is probably worried that they're like, oh, well, there's already racial sensitivities or insensitivities, depending on the way you want to look at it. So we don't want to drum up more issues or with people hating people who look a certain way just because those criminals that do that happen to look like that. And there's so many other innocent people out there that don't do that who happen to look like that. And that's not fair. Then why even mention it at all? And I think it was less about that and more so about the whole incel thing that I talked about earlier, where these young guys are following these ideologies, no matter what the ideology is, and they feel trapped. They feel like they don't have a place to air their grievances, or if they do, they're vilified for it. And then they go to the absolute extreme.
It's becoming obvious that the goal of the Red Pill thought leaders isn't to have healthy relationships in their own lives and in turn to teach other men how to have them as well, but instead their main goal is to denigrate women because of their unresolved rage. Any self-respecting guy is willing to say that yes, after a breakup, Red Pill can be useful because certain ideas in it can help you avoid toxic relationships in the future. But it's also becoming obvious the longer you stay in Red Pill land, the more angry and distorted your soul will become. And the fact this guy is a Red Pill thought leader is proof.
How does that make you feel? Aren't you supposed to say I'm not ugly? What I think isn't important. Yeah, you don't say the things normal people say, do you? Well, how would you feel if I did say you're not ugly? I just don't know why you don't say the things normal people say. You thought
this part infuriated me with this freaking woman. And honestly, this part where the kid is saying, I feel ugly, I mean, how? Right? They took a Gerber baby, most adorable looking kid to play this part, which then he's saying, oh, I'm ugly or whatever. Or maybe he said I feel ugly or whatever. Maybe that's the inside or whatnot. But that would have hit a lot harder if it was from someone with a different ethnic background who was bullied in a place where the majority of the ethnic demographic of the UK is not that, right? Or what the person is, or the main character is. And it would have been understandable if he was being bullied for that reason. And maybe it's best that they didn't do that because everything's about that now, about black people being oppressed or non-white people being oppressed. And I think, honestly, even people from the community are very sick and tired of that. So maybe, honestly, this is the most bland, safe version that they could have taken. And probably also because this kid is a really good actor. He's acting his ass off. The woman's doing a good job, too, being freaking annoying. I hate when therapists are like, how does that make you feel? Bitch, how do you think it fucking makes me feel? Why are you asking me that shit? You're trying to make me crazy so I can keep coming here and spending money. I don't know. It's just a really weird thing. Not all therapists are like that, but in the movies, how they perpetuate the therapists when they're speaking with people that are clearly agonizing over something. It's they're trying to tick the people off more.
Dad was ashamed of you and you think I should contradict you now when you tell me you think yourself ugly? I don't know. I'm interested in the fact that you think you're ugly, Jamie. Yeah, I'm fascinated. I'm interested in it because what you think is more important to me than what is true, okay?
It is? Oh well, whatever. Now, people must be wondering, like on Twitter and stuff, that people are talking about the whole race swapping thing, right? Like, why did they decide to go this angle with using the little white kid? Well, I like to talk about nuance because I know everybody's very sensitive and there have been declining positive portrayals of white men or white males in general, and I understand that. But at the same time, honestly, I would not call this a race swapping case, as I've said. Like, making the argument can almost come off as petty, in my opinion, or confirmation bias. And while I will say, yes, there is a problem with race swapping, I acknowledge that. I don't think in this case the fight belongs here where it comes to that. While I understand where some people are coming from, and I know it must be very sensitive to people, especially if they are born in the UK and they're going through the situation, it's probably even way more sensitive to them. But this person, Jamie, was an already established character. It wasn't like somebody specifically committed this crime and they're using the name of that person and the exact type of crime and then changing the person's ethnicity despite having the same name of the actual criminal. That would be race swapping. Like what they did with the earlier examples I showed with Cleopatra and Anne Boleyn, making them black women. Those are real historical figures. It would also be race swapping if they made Yasuke or something a Polish man. That is race swapping. But in a fictional universe like the one in Adolescence, where they created a character who decided to stab his victim, and let's be honest, stabbing is not something that's exclusive to non-white people, I don't see anything particularly wrong with this. Like, I find it more of an issue that they're going on the angle of the whole incel thing. And honestly, maybe it's not all bad, because depending on how you interpret this Netflix show, just based on the clips I've seen, it might give you a better empathetic understanding of what these little boys must go through. And people seem as though they made this so that this discussion can be had, because they see that there's an actual issue with their young people in their country. These little boys, obviously, they have no outlets to air their grievances, or they are ashamed for it. The teachers are not stepping in. And so they start looking to these online groups that make them feel heard, and they end up indoctrinating them with these very harmful ideologies when all they needed to do was to feel comfortable in their masculinity, hang out with other guys, and have a healthy father figure or healthy male figures, people who are looking out for them and just not, everybody else except for them because of their ethnicity or their sex, and not be told that something is inherently wrong with them just for existing or being a boy kid or whatever it is that people have an issue with. Here's the thing though, right? I'm glad that they want to have the discussion for this, but there was a problem with this. Like, on top of everything, whenever there are older men who actively are trying to keep young guys in line, like what Anthony Mackie was saying about how he raises his boys.
In the past 20 years, we've been living through the death of the American male. They have literally killed masculinity in our homes and our communities.
Ready? Just fucking kiss me, man.
Hey, yo, what the fuck? They get shamed for that too, and women are always saying men need to hold other men accountable, but when a man like Anthony Mackie openly talks about instilling good values in his sons, like respect and responsibility, suddenly it's, oh, you're putting too much pressure on them. Let kids be kids. Like, what? You literally can't win. It's either men are toxic and they need to raise boys better and hold other men accountable, or when they do that, oh, men are toxic for trying too hard to raise their boys right. Like, pick a lane. Then it's like, you wonder why old men are just like, I'm gonna give up. Maybe people just need to shut their mouths and let men raise their own damn kids. The real problem is that so many men aren't in the home, or if they are, they're told they can't discipline their kids or lead in any meaningful way. So now we got a generation of boys coming up who don't even know what being a man looks like. All they've seen is this dynamic where the woman does everything, makes all the decisions, while the man sits in the background, unable to act normal as a human being, unsure of his role, feeling helpless and bouncing, the moment things get hard. And I'm not saying that's true for everybody, but that is the image that has been pushed in media for years now.
Unless, of course, you were trying to speak for a woman.
I have not, nor will I ever speak for a woman.
That's right. Know your place, boy. Anyways, I will watch this. Like, I think it's good that people are having a conversation about this, but situations like this don't just happen out of the blue. The person who did the crime should 100% be condemned for it and punished for it. Absolutely. Whether it's a man or a woman. You know how when women do something bad and people always say, oh, it's fatherless behavior? Well, it's the same thing that happens with men. There's this weird thing that happens when you have a father in the home. They temper you and teach you how to manage your emotions respectfully. Like, mothers can teach that too, but since men are so good at it because they are expected to always keep themselves in control no matter what in society happens, they're not given a pass, you know, for being emotional or having a bad day. It's not written off as, oh, he's just having hormones when they fly off the handle about something, because they're seen as more dangerous and stronger, and they have to learn to keep that in check. And so they're the best teachers of that if they're well socialized. Like, most of my good values that I've learned, and this is not to, like, you know, my mom and I have reconciled, and I'm so happy about that. But there was a lot of damage done specifically from her side because she was also hurt by her mom. And I'm so glad I had my father in the home, because even though she taught me some good values, like how to function in society, how to be strong, my father, I got most of the emotional kindness and, you know, the social, I wouldn't call it leashing, but like learning how to temper myself, learning how to be with other people. I get that from my daddy. And I think that innately the baselines in men and women are beautiful when they work in tandem. And if we have somehow arrived at a societal milestone in our existence where men and women can no longer like work in tandem or synchronize with each other, then it's no wonder why people aren't willing to breed and have kids with each other anymore. I mean, it's more than that. I know there's a lot more variables involved in that. But, you know, men being scared to death of someone lying on them and then going to jail because the system is now set up to overcorrect and believe absolutely every single thing a woman says without evidence, it's going to breed a host of resentment, especially when you've had time and time again situations where men have gone to jail just based on something a woman said, only for it to be discovered later, like 20, 30 years later, after they spent life in jail for something they didn't do, the woman lied on them, and oh, I'm so sorry, after 30 years of their life is gone. Like, and for the women to have absolutely no idea, like, what's going on, like, people that are not, like, terminally online, or they're just going out there living their lives, they have no idea that this is happening, right? From their perspective, they're gonna resent men that are acting out because they don't trust any women. The men don't trust the women. And so these women who are unsuspecting of what's going on in society, they're just like, oh, I'm just gonna go outside now for the first time in 10 years. And all the men are like staying away from them. They're like, what the hell? So they're gonna resent these men. They're gonna be like, I don't know what happened to men, bro, but dude. And so they treat every woman, you know, like an issue, these men, which is then going to cause those women that they come in contact with that are good women. That's what happens when, you know, you have an influx of certain ideologies in society from either side, because one begets the other. Anyways, what do you guys think? Like, do you think that the society of incels exists because men are mutating into more aggressive things and they're mean? Do you think it's predominantly because of the internet and hookup culture with people losing their values, or there being a lack of shame? Do you think it's because women are now at the point where they claim they don't need men at all, even though we as women still rely on men for most of the services we benefit from? And if you're a woman in OnlyFans, you're making all that money by using fan base, which is 99% men. But regardless, there's another side to it, because of hookup and internet culture, men don't need to be faithful anymore. So they get mad that women are thoughts. But then when they actually find a good woman, they cheat on her for those same thoughts, which in turn cause a domino effect. That woman who was a good girl becomes bitter against men because when she was a good girl, that man treated her like shit to chase after the girls he claims don't deserve any respect. So in that good girl's mind, she's thinking, well, why don't I become a thought? Because obviously the nice girls get nothing. We get treated like shit. And then they become incels. Like, is it a chicken and the egg situation? Like, or chicken before the egg, or egg before the chicken? Is the justice system the way it is right now because of women? Or is it because the men in power allowed this to happen and created this monster because they knew that women would vote emotionally, they would have the women's vote? While most people do vote emotionally, they believe many women vote emotionally more so than dudes do. And so they can get the votes of women by giving them more power over the men in their circle that ensures the people in power stay in power without realizing how it's tearing apart the society. Like, it's a lot of moving parts, a lot of things to discuss. I'm not saying I'm right about any of these things, just things that I've observed that I could be completely 100% wrong about, but I just find it extremely interesting how everything seems to have a trickle-down effect, and what it really seems to boil down to is, no matter what you think, it's mismanagement and corruption. While people should absolutely take accountability for their own individual choices, if we're talking about, like, society as a whole, things seem to be this bad because of what the people in power have done over the last few years, what they have allowed to take place. And it's funny because when you go to less built up areas in the world or live alongside people like that, you know, or even just watch documentaries on small tribes in certain African countries, like you see in Fearless and Far's video here, you don't really see these problems. You really don't. These people seem so happy. They're healthy. They're living to be the epitome of what humanity should be. They're athletic, and you know they don't have any of those issues. I think he was the same guy, the guy who made this video, this documentary, where he talked to these guys. He's like, "Hey, have you ever thought about, you know, what do you think about life and what it is?" And these guys, their answer was something like, "Oh, we just like, where's meat? You know, where's our meat gonna come from tomorrow?" Or, you know, and they're like, "Stars." They're like, "Star what? No, meat. That's the meaning of life." Because they don't have time to worry about all that other shit because they have to survive. And then the men go out. It's really cool. You should actually watch his channel. But these men, they go out. I don't think it's every day, but they walk over many distances, particularly with men. So you have young men and older men that bond together. They learn from each other. They hunt. They have camaraderie and they get high together. Like, it's so cool. They come back, and then the women, they also bond with each other. But then when the men come back, the women function a certain role in their little community, and the men function a certain role, and they get along very, very well. You don't see them hating each other like, oh, the women over there, men ain't shit, women ain't shit. Like, these issues seem to be tied specifically to mega societies and industrialization, or the westernization of the Western class of people. The higher up you go is the more unhappy people seem to be with themselves because they have absolutely nothing to do with their fucking time. And no, it's not just a capitalism thing, because I already know someone's gonna say that. This is a very human issue that happens globally, whether the system is capitalist or communist. The difference is people in capitalist countries appear to have a little bit more freedom to openly grieve about these issues and voice their frustrations. Anyway, I will watch this. I was just mainly talking about the subject on Twitter with the race swapping thing and the reasoning behind why they decide to cast this person, probably, and the broader conversation of it. But I think it's a good thing to watch it because I think it is an issue, not just in the UK, but maybe more so in the UK. And I would like to hear from you guys what you think the issue is. I think there's a lot of moving parts, like I said, but I'd like to hear your perspective of what you think the issue is.
Adolescence on Netflix is now, in my opinion, the best series and/or film that Netflix has ever produced.